Alright guys, let's do it. The app I mean. So, terminal is running, the React packager is running, and of course here is our wonderful app. This is the weather app, and right now it's not telling us the weather, but it will in time. So let's do a couple of things before we get started. The first thing I want to do here inside my index.ios.js is I want to set up a const called API_key. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to have to keep copy and pasting my key everywhere, here, there, here, there. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back into my simulator and turn on live reload because I saved it and it didn't reload, which made me realize that I had messed it up. Okay, so the other thing we're going to add in is we're also going to import the image component from React Native. And the reason we're going to do that is because when we display the weather, you saw that I had that icon that kind of gave a brief summary of what the weather conditions were like outside. Okay, so we're going to do that. Now, we are going to need one more thing to make this work, and that is called Axios. And Axios is a great NPM package for handling HTTP requests, get and post and put and stuff like that. So in terminal, from inside the folder for your project, as you can see here, we're going to run npm install Axios --save. So that's going to download and install Axios, and like I said, that's a dependency that we're going to require in order to go ahead and take care of these the GET requests that we're going to be making. And we are go ahead and import Axios. Let's do it lowercase. It doesn't actually matter. And then we will import Axios. So yeah, great. Now the other const I want to do is default zip code, and you can do whatever zip code you want. I'm gonna do 90210. I don't actually live in Beverly Hills, California. But I do what I want, and you're not going to stop me. So, well, I mean, maybe you will. Whatever. Anyways, let's go ahead and take care of these standard styles. I'm going to take them out of there, and I'm going to leave the container style. And actually, I think I'm going to change the background color to that beautiful Facebooky blue that was on there earlier. It's actually almost too dark, but whatever. And let's go ahead and see if I can have it removed now. Voila, I can. So I told you in a different video that if you simply add the component status bar with a prop of hidden, then the status bar will go away. And what I meant by that is you can see you don't have the time or the battery or anything up there, and if I refresh without that code, it goes away anyway. Awesome. The reason it stayed hidden is the info.plist gets updated in Xcode, your Xcode project, and that basically just keeps the status bar from coming back. So you're going to have to change that if you want to show your status bar. Whatever. That's not what we're here for, so I'm not worried about it. You're not worried about it. Nobody's worried about it. Great. Let's start by setting our data. Now, of course, internal data is handled by state, and so in order to have state, we must initialize state. And the way that I plan to do that is to have two values. One of zip code, which will be default zip code to start with, and the other one is going to be days. And days is just going to be an empty array. And what days is will be an array of objects containing the pertinent information for each day that we plan to show in the app. In this case, it'll be 4 days total, today plus the next 3 days. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this thing going. The first thing I'm going to do here in my render function is actually see if we have any data. And if we don't have any data, then we need to make our call to the Weather Underground API. So I'm going to say if this.state.days.length is less than or equal to 0. I could do directly equal to, but I'm not going to because I want to do less than or equal to 0. Then we're going to go ahead and call a function called, I don't know, let's just say get forecast, and then we will provide to that this.state.zip code. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, why don't you just simply get the zip code from the state inside the function? Well, I could, but in future versions of the app, we might want to change it to where, we can change the zip code from a text input. And you might notice I have this red error screen, and the reason we have that is because the getForecast method doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and create that. GetForecast, which will take a parameter or an argument of zip code, and voila, now we have our app showing again in all its glory. So if you're not familiar with the way HTTP requests work, there are two main ones that's GET and POST. Typically, a GET request passes data via the URL string parameters, and a POST request typically puts data into the body of the actual request, so in the headers. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. Let's first set a const for the request URL that we're going to be using, and that request URL is http://api.wunderground.com/API/our API key, which is required when we make any requests, /forecast/q/our actual location query. In this case, it's going to be whatever zip code was supplied to the application, and then an extension for that file. In this case, we want to have JSON returned, and so what we're going to do is just add .json. If we wanted XML, we could put .xml at the end, and what that's going to do is just tell the API endpoint that we want them to return JSON or XML. Quickly, I'm going to go ahead and do an alert of request URL just so we can see it, and as you can see, we get API underground, my actual API key, yours will be different, /forecast/q/90210.json. So we know that the request URL is set up properly. Now, let's go ahead and make our first GET request. Okay, so we're going to do Axios.get, okay, and what we're going to do is supply to Axios the request URL. Now, if you're not familiar with the way JavaScript promises work, this next part might be kind of confusing. If you are familiar with the way promises work, then it won't be an issue. If this is too confusing with promises, I would definitely suggest that you go ahead and watch a video tutorial on JavaScript promises, and I will include one in the link down below. So after the promise is returned, then we will supply an anonymous function, which takes an argument of response. And inside these curly braces here, we are going to go ahead and do something, with this code or with this data. Now, if you're doing this on iOS, you're going to see that we're having a possible unhandled promise rejection with a network error. The reason that we have this error is because by default, good old iOS no longer allows you to have HTTP requests being made. They want you to use HTTPS, which totally is fine. But for the purpose of this application, we're just going to go ahead and bypass that. And, it's just what we're going to do. Okay. So we're going to head over to our info.plist, and we are going to look for app transport security settings and just show that. And what we're going to do is add another value and select allow arbitrary loads. Okay, and then we're going to change the value to yes. And that is literally all there is to it. Okay, you don't have to do anything else, at least as far as settings go. So what we're going to do is quickly close Xcode and close the simulator. And what I'm going to do is rerun run-ios. And the reason we're doing that is because it needs to recompile the settings. So since it's not actually a JavaScript change, we can't just simply reload from the packager. Okay, so it's being rebuilt and it'll be put back onto our simulator, and now we'll be able to make HTTP requests without having to have the SSL encryption, and it's not an issue anymore. Let's give it just a second to go ahead and get loaded up. Great, and you'll notice that I don't get the yellow bar down here that says that the promise was rejected. Okay, great. So the first thing that you want to do whenever you have these get requests and post requests is check to make sure that the status code of the response, which is just the property status, is directly equal to 200. In HTTP requests, that means okay. We mean good. The request is okay. There wasn't any problems. Go ahead and do with it what you will. Okay. Now, the problem with not really knowing the data structure is that it can sometimes be difficult to know what we intend to do here, or what properties we have access to. So even though I know the data structure, you may not. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the developer menu, which is Command D, and I'm going to click on debug remote JS, and I'm going to open up. It says it can't run. I'm on a Mac, so it's trying to load up something completely different through Parallels, which I'm not going to let it do. Instead, I'm going to type localhost 8081/debugger UI and hit enter. What that's going to do is pull this pretty little window up here, and when I go to the JavaScript console, I will then have access to whatever is being shown. Now when I reload it, bada bing, bada boom, it's not a problem, okay? Forget about it. All right, that wasn't, I mean, I guess it was funny. I don't know, whatever. I'm going to move this over here just a little bit and get this Parallels window out of the way for you. Okay, so if the response.status is 200, we're just going to go ahead and console.log the response.data. And data is, where the actual returned data will come in. I don't want to have to see the whole response object. It's way too much to look at. So, there's just no reason for it. All right, now in our response, let's make this a little bit bigger. We have forecast and response. This actual response is more related to the actual request and is not something that we actually need to worry about. In our case, of these two values inside the request object, we have simple request and text request, and the one that we're actually going to use is simple request. So simple request is an object which contains an array of forecast day, and because we're making a request to a 3-day forecast, we get 4 objects. That's today plus the next 3 days. And as you can see, it's got high of 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius, a low of 55 and 13. The conditions are clear, etc., etc., etc. So it's a rather large object, as you can see, and each day has its own set of values. The structure is exactly the same. And you remember I said that we were going to have this image showing, and that image is actually this icon URL. So if we were to go straight to this image by just copy and pasting it into our browser, here's what we would get. Clear. So it's just a sun. Okay. No, not anything too fancy. You may notice that this terminal error is giving me another yellow window, and what that means is that I've gone to the background with the debugger, and React Native can slow down if you have bigger applications because communication between the server and debugger can slow. It's not really something you have to worry about, but yeah. So now you've seen the data structure, and I actually already have the values that we want to use written down. So you can just follow along with me, or if you actually want to, figure out your own values, you are more than welcome to do so. Just look through the data structure and figure out what you want to use. I'm going to stop the remote debugging so that I don't have that constant annoying error. And let's go ahead and get back to what we were doing. The first step, or I should say the next step, is to start taking this data and placing it into our state. And the way that I plan to do that is, first of all, shortening the amount of typing we have to do by setting a variable called weather. And that's going to be equal to the response.data.forecast.forecast.day. You might recall that forecast day is an array with 4 values, one value, which is an object, for each day of the forecast we've drawn. I'm also going to make an array called forecast. It's just going to be an empty array. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to directly manipulate the days array inside state, because there's 4 days, and I'm going to have to iterate over the forecast days. I don't want to set state at the end of each of the 4 iterations, because if I do that, then the application will re-render 4 times before the actual data is completed, before I have all 4 days worth of forecast data. And that's just kind of silly. So instead, we're going to make a temporary variable called forecast, which is the blank array, fill that with the data, and then set state.days equal to the data in forecast. Then the whole application can reload with all 4 days worth of data. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here because, like I said, I don't want them to get too long. Stay tuned to the next video, and we will take all of the data, and we're going to put it into objects, put those objects into the forecast array, set state.days to that data, and then set up some actual JSX inside our render method to actually display this data in a fancy pants way. All right, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, especially subscribing to the channel. It really, really helps me out. And leave comments if you have any problems. I answer all the questions. You can probably see that from some of the earlier videos. And I always provide a link in the description to all of my videos with my profile on the iOS App Store. So definitely check those out. Those are all written in React Native. Download the ones you like. Maybe pay for the premium ones. Whatever. All right, guys. See ya.